Hi, I'm Michael Morrison, and the following is an example of a child-safe presentation taking place just after you finish the initial rapport building. So the name of the company is American Income Life. We've been around for over 60 years providing benefits to over 20,000 different unions and associations. We're talking police, firefighters, veterans. And I'd say we're not your typical insurance company because really we don't advertise. In fact, we just don't knock on strangers' doors. Historically speaking, we'd really only be meeting with existing union members. But times are changing, and because of the necessity of benefits like the Child Safe Kit, we've been compelled to open our doors to provide this benefit to as many families as humanly possible in the province of Ontario. And we're doing this because this kit saves lives. Now, as I mentioned in our phone call, our meeting has two parts. The first is to protect your child, and that's using the Child Safe Kit. And the second is to protect your child in case, heaven forbid, something happens to you. Now, John, do you have your phone with you? Good. And in your contacts, just roughly, how many people would you say are in there? 200? Hey, you're more popular than me. So just estimate a percentage. Of those 200 people, how many of them have kids? 25%? So about 50 people roughly? Okay. Well, in that case, please pay very close attention, because what I'm about to show you is going to be extremely important for not just your family, but those 50 families. This is the Child Safe Kit. Now, I'm sure you're very familiar with Amber Alerts. Those notifications that go out and they come on your phone or on your TV whenever there's a missing child. When you read through them, you see that there's a full physical description and any important details that can be used to help track down that child. Now, when a child goes missing, it's extremely important to communicate accurate and timely information to the police. Because if you imagine for a moment that a child ends up in a car, in just 1 hour, that child could end up 100 kilometers away. And with each passing hour, the search radius for that child then needs to expand in every direction 100 more kilometers. See, the odds of finding a child are always best in the beginning. And unfortunately, when time passes, the odds go down. When a child goes missing, parents are flustered. They're worried. They're very concerned. And when police officers are going to ask them for all the details that are important, it's hard to come up with that information on the spot. This is why we created the Child Safe Kit. It's a tool that you can keep at home that's going to take all the vital information that you need for your child when it comes to physical description, current photos, anything that you might need to communicate to the authorities. On the front of the kit, this is where you're going to be putting Timmy's name. And then just below that, the date that this kit was either completed or updated on. Now, it's very important that you write in pencil because you're going to be needing to update this kit roughly every 6 to 12 months. Does that make sense? Good. Now, I just want to note that the kit is also endorsed by the International Union of Police Associations, so they know what it is and how to use it. Okay? Good. On the first page of the kit, this is where you're going to be writing down all of his vital information. I'm talking not just first and last name, but any nicknames he goes by. Height, weight, hair color, eye color. And what I normally recommend is whenever you go for his annual doctor visit, just bring the kit with you because you're going to be able to fill in a lot of those boxes right there. Height, weight, blood type, whatever else is needed, okay? Good. And on the inside of the kit, in section 2, this is where it says physical description. And what we're talking about here is any identifying features. Things like glasses, or if he's wearing braces, birthmarks, moles, anything that could help him to stand out. What you want to do is write down that information in lines here. And then on the figures, if there's something like a birthmark, it might be easier to draw than to write down. So be sure to just draw it on the figures. Does that make sense? Good. And in section 3, where it says DNA sample, this is where you can attach a hair. Now the thing is, you can't just cut the hair because the root needs to be attached in order for there to be some DNA in it. So you'll need to pull the hair from the root Simply just attach it here, maybe in a little bag or something, and it's good for up to 10 years. Now, since Timmy's very young, I normally don't recommend that, because another way to do things is just to use fingernails. So the next time you're clipping Timmy's fingernails, just attach them in a little bag, and you can attach them in the kit here. Those are good for up to 25 years. Does that make sense? Good. Now, just below that, I'm sure you noticed, this kit includes a wet ink strip. So in the fingerprint section, when it's time, simply take the strip and pull it apart, and there is enough ink for every one of his fingers. Just remember to do one finger at a time, and it will keep things nice and neat. Do you understand? Good. Now on the back of the kit, this is where you're going to be attaching a current photo. And when you put that photo there, be sure to write his age and the date the photo was taken. Now, what I normally recommend is when it's time to update this photo, which you should be doing roughly every 6 to 12 months, just leave the old photo there. If you simply put the new one on top, what happens is if a child goes missing for an extended period of time, authorities are able to use the photos behind it to see the changes that have happened over time, and they can do an age progression to find out what someone is going to look like later on. Now, since he goes to school, I normally recommend just using a school photo. It's pretty much the same pose every single year, and it's the best way to be able to determine those changes over time. Does that make sense? Good. Now, we understand that the Child Safe Kit is an extremely helpful tool that you can keep in an easy to access place at home. But we also understand that it's not necessarily something you're going to be taking with you everywhere you go. No, I mean, you might go out to the mall, you might go out to the grocery store, and children can get separated from you anywhere. So in the event that something happens while you're out, we've created the Child Safe app, something you can bring with you on your phone. Imagine you're in the mall on a busy day, you turn your back for a few moments, maybe Timmy wanders off. If he gets separated from you, the first thing you can do is you can find a security guard. You can share the information in the app with the security guard, including a current photo and a physical description, and that security guard could in turn share that information with their colleagues. In a few moments, you could have security guards standing at every single exit in the mall with a photo and a physical description, making sure that Timmy does not leave the mall unless he is first reunited with you. Does that make sense? Good. Now, I'd like to make sure that you get the app for yourselves. So since you have your phones, what you're going to be looking for on the App Store if you have an Apple phone, or in the Play Store if you have an Android phone, is the Kids Safety Kit. Let me know when you found it. Good. Third one down with the hand symbol. Perfect. Okay, and I've got a username for you here. Okay, so let's just get that username entered. Okay, and you know what? Since mine is already set up, I'm just going to use mine as an example, okay? So this is the first page of the kit. This is where it would show my information. You see Michael and my wife, Jane. Now, when you hit the menu button, this is where you can access child profiles. Okay, so my example is John Doe, and since I don't actually have kids, I use the example of my nephew. Now you'll notice that there are photos included from multiple angles, which is always great. And then just like the first page of the Child Safe Kit, his height, his weight, his full physical description, and just below that, any other information that's important to communicate, such as I put, he has asthma and an inhaler is needed. Okay, now in the event of an emergency, if there is a child missing that maybe needs insulin for diabetes every few hours, then you want to definitely communicate that information to authorities, and the app will help you do that. When it's time, simply press the share button, always include a photo, press next, and then you're able to share this information for however long you deem necessary. Simply move the little wheel here and determine how many hours you'd like to share that information. If it's just that you're going out for, an evening out and you want to share this information with a babysitter, simply go ahead and share it for as many hours as you think you'll be away. Press next, and then you can share this as a text message or as an email, however you need to. It will give them temporary access to Timmy's information, and then it will expire. Do you understand? Good. Now, I hope you never need to use that, but obviously it's an important tool. And as I mentioned earlier, we're doing our very best to get the kit out to as many families as humanly possible in the province of Ontario, and we need your help. Now, you mentioned that you know about 50 people with children, and earlier you mentioned that you have a brother living in the neighborhood. So the first person this would go to would be your brother. And his name was? Jack? Same last name, Doe? Okay. And what's the best number to reach him at? Is it a 416 or a 647? 416? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay. Who's next? Just start at the A's and we can just work our way down. Okay. And that's Alan, James. And what's the best number to reach him? Is it a 647 or a 416? 416. Okay. All right. Who's next? Bobby, Singh. And what's the best number to reach him? 647 or 416? 647. Okay. Now that we have all of those names, is Jack married? Yes. And what's his spouse's name? Jenna? Okay. And roughly what part of town do they live in? Just an intersection. Yonge and Eglinton? Okay. And how many kids do they have? 2 kids? Oh, a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old? Okay. And is Alan married? Yes. Okay. Rebecca? Okay. And roughly what part of town are they living in? Just an intersection. Woodbine and Kingston Road? Okay. And how many kids do they have? 3 kids? Okay. And is Bobby married? Okay. And what's his wife's name? Nanja? Okay. And roughly what part of town do they live in? Just an intersection. Don Mills and Steeles area. Okay. And how many kids do they have? 1 child. Okay. Good. Now, obviously, I want you to reach out to them. Just 3 people. So go ahead and give them a chance to, give them a call while I'm here. And let's go ahead and just talk to Jack right away. Why don't we? What we can do is we'll just let him know what the kid is and that you're meeting with me. And if he wants, he can even speak to me. Okay? Good. All right. And he says he's home tomorrow between 5 and 6. Perfect. Yeah, I'm going to be in the area. No problem. Okay. Good. Glad we did that. And you know what? For the other 2, I'm just going to send you a text message right now. And this is something that you can forward to them. Okay. Just says, you met with Michael Morrison today. I gave you the Child Safe kit. And then mentions my number to expect a call from me. Okay. Perfect. All right. I'll typically follow up within about 24 to 48 hours max. Okay. Great. Now, as I mentioned earlier, our meeting has 2 parts. The first is to protect Timmy, and that's using the Child Safe kit. The second is to protect Timmy in case, heaven forbid, something happens to you. Now, the next benefit that I'm going to give to you is probably the most important document that I'm going to be leaving with you today. It's called the Family Information Guide. And this simple piece of paper has been proven to save families thousands of dollars. You see, we found that there is a common problem in most families, and it's a lack of communication. See, it's not that you don't talk. Obviously, you see each other every single day. It's just that there are typically certain topics that families don't talk about. I'm talking about insurance benefits through work, bank accounts and where you can find them. You know, when it comes to those benefits, if they aren't claimed, then there's no benefit paid. And every single year, hundreds of thousands of dollars go unclaimed simply because families didn't know that they existed. The Family Information Guide is something for your family to keep at home that gives access to that information in the event that something happens to you. So you don't have to fill it out while you're here with me, but I'm just going to walk you through it to explain, and then later on you can take some time to fill it out. Does that make sense? Good. Now this first section where it says vital statistics and historical data, John, that's where you're going to be putting your information, all right? Your address, your phone number, SIN number, and since you mentioned you're a part of a union, be sure to include your union and local number, simply because your family doesn't want to have to be searching around for that information later on. Make sense? Good. And Jane, this next section where it says spouse, obviously it's a little bit small, so I want to let you know that we actually have one for you too. Good. Didn't want to leave you out. Now the next section is pretty important. It says persons to be notified. Now, John, obviously if something happened to you, Jane would be the first person to be notified, right? And Jane, if something happened to you, obviously John would be the first person to be notified. But heaven forbid, if something happened to both of you, you want to write down the people that would be the first ones that you want reached out to. So obviously, John, your brother, you say he lives down the street, that might be the first person you put down. And if there are any other people, even if people that you haven't seen in a little while, maybe friends that you went to school with, people that you work with, you want to put down those names here, okay? And Jane, since you have your own, be sure to include some different names, because the more the better. Now this next section where it says person to be in charge of final arrangements is essential, because you want to put down that person who's going to be the first one to step in and take care of business, okay? If you're not around anymore, especially with Timmy here, you want that person to be the one to jump in, okay? Be sure to notify that person as well. Now, just below that, where it says last will and testament, do you have a will? No? Jane? No. Okay, and that's all right. I understand you guys are young and you're thinking about life right now, but it's a pretty important document that can be used to protect your family. It makes it so that the government isn't writing checks on your account after you passed away. So when you do get a will, be sure to write down that it exists and where it can be found. Does that make sense? Good. In this next section, where it says estate information, is primarily concerned with life insurance. Now, John, do you have life insurance? Yes? Is that group, like through work, or is that private? Private? Okay. And do you remember if it's whole life or term insurance? Term insurance? Okay. And what's the company it's with? Hey, good company, I know of them. Yeah. And do you remember how much? Good. So you want to write that down. Be sure to write down the company name, the policy number, and the amount that you just mentioned. And Jane, do you have life insurance? Yes? And you mentioned you're not working, so is that private insurance? Okay. Same company? Okay. Is that term or whole life? Also term? Okay, same amount? Okay, so yeah, then for you, same thing. Just write down the company name, the policy number, and the amount. Your family is going to need to know that because they're the ones who are going to be making the claim. Now the next section that talks about banking information. Did you guys know that the law in Ontario is that if someone passes away and their account goes unclaimed for 7 years, the government can just step in and take it? Well, that is the policy, unfortunately. And so what you're writing down here doesn't give people access to the account. Really, it's just saying that the account exists so that they can take the necessary steps to claim that money. Okay? So be sure to write down your bank accounts, because we know we're living in an age where a lot of our banking is done without a physical paper trail. You know, we have our cell phones, we have apps where we can do our online banking, and there are banks that don't even have physical branch locations anymore, like Simply or Tangerine. So Because of that, it's extremely important that you write down your banking info or any investments that you have out there so that your family receives this money. Do you understand? Good. And then just below that, where it says safe deposit box, first thing you should do if you have one is put both your names on it. All right, because that becomes locked up in probate when someone passes away. And at least if you have a second name, it can be accessed. The same policy exists with banking information. If it goes unclaimed for 7 years, the government can take it. Okay? All right, in the next section, this is what families typically really don't like to talk about, but it's extremely important. Funeral service requests. So do you have any sort of funeral plan? No? You haven't really talked about it? Okay. Hey, I understand. You know what? Again, you're young. But of course, when it comes to funerals, we're all eventually going to pass away, whether it's from old age or whether it's from sickness or an accident. And when we have not put down any sort of detail or discussed it with our family, we're leaving it entirely up to them to decide what happens after we pass away. And imagine for a moment, maybe you just want something simple. Maybe you don't need all the flowers and all the extra extravagant golden inlaid caskets, but your family loves you and they're going to spend money on you after you pass away. So especially if you're someone that maybe just wants to be cremated, you want to indicate that so someone isn't going out there and spending thousands of dollars that they didn't need to spend on a casket. Does that make sense? Good. Now, again, I hope you don't need to use this anytime soon, but it's an important tool, and I hope you'll take some time to fill that out later. Understand? Good. Now, what I'd like to do is ask you a few questions to find out what else you're entitled to know about too. So, John, I'm going to ask you a few questions. Jane, you as well. They're just general medical questions. And in order to qualify, it's based on your age. It's based on qualifying during the enrollment period, which is while I'm here with you today. And it's based on your health. So John, I just want to make sure I have your spelling correct. Doe is just D-O-E, right? Okay. And what is your date of birth? Okay. January 1st, 1985. And Jane, is it the same last name? Yeah, also Doe. Okay. And what is your date of birth? August 26th, 1984. Okay, and Timmy, children are actually covered under their parents. So Timmy's last name is Doe as well, okay? And when was he born? June 15th, 2012. Okay, all right, and just a few questions. I just need to know if there's a family history of, or if you're experiencing any of these conditions. Any cancer? No? Okay. Any diabetes? No? Okay. Any cardiovascular disease? No? Okay. And I see no one's using oxygen. Anyone in the family using oxygen? No? Okay. Any terminal illnesses at all? No? Okay. Any Alzheimer's? No? All right. And have either of you used any form of tobacco in the past 12 months, including marijuana and cigars? No? Okay. Are either of you currently on probation or parole? No? And anyone arrested or convicted of driving under the influence? No? Okay. All right, so John, after the tax is taken out, just roughly what do you bring home each month? Okay, about $3,500. Okay. And Jane, you mentioned that you're not working right now. You're just making sure to take care of Timmy, which is the hardest job of them all. So no income, that's fine. All right. So I'm just going to take a moment to review a mandatory read-off letter with you. In fact, just a paragraph of it. We'll keep it nice and short and sweet here. Okay, and it just says, AIL's supplemental benefits are not in competition with any group benefits offered through your workplace or employer and can complement any insurance policies you may already have. If you choose to take advantage of any insurance programs offered through AIL, your benefit program is permanent and portable throughout your lifetime. That just means that if you move, you still have your coverage. And it just means that it's with you as long as you need to have it, okay? And the rest just says, I'm going to take a minute now to explain how the program works. If there's anything here that makes sense for you and you want to take advantage of it, then do so today. If it doesn't make sense for you guys, I'll typically just ask you not to enroll. And either way, just a simple yes or no is fine. Make sense? Good. And are you both with me? Excellent. Okay, I'm just going to take a minute to write down a few details for you here. Okay, so our program has two sides. The first side is protection for the family. And the second side is living benefits. What do you have when we're alive? Now, the first item under protection is final expense. Now, John, within 24 to 48 hours after your passing, Jane is going to have to walk into a funeral home and deal with your final expense. She'll be at her most vulnerable emotional state, and she'll have to sit down with a funeral director and begin planning everything that's needed. Now, what most people don't realize is a funeral is the second largest social function that people will have to spend money on, the first being a wedding. And in the funeral industry, love equals how much you spend. Now, this is where families can get victimized. You see, that funeral director is going to be asking for an immediate form of payment. Now, in some cases, families will rely on their savings. In others, they may rely on their life insurance. Now, either of them is fine as a form of payment, but the truth is none of them is ideal because neither of them has a set budget. Now, we were asked to come up with something, and we did. It's called the Freedom of Choice Certificate. Now, John, if you qualify for this, it is essentially a funeral benefit plan backed by life insurance. That means that Jane, after John passes, you're able to simply bring this in to any funeral home in the country, make your arrangements as you would anyway, and then when it's time, simply write down the dollar amount, the policy number, and who it's going to, ABC Funeral Home. Simply sign and date, and like you're writing a check, just leave it with them. The funeral director will then call this number here, and AIL will pay them directly. That means that you will not have to worry about emptying your savings account or borrowing money or using a credit card. You will simply be able to grieve in peace, and we will pay them directly. And most importantly, we will never reveal how much was actually in the budget. So they'll never be able to take advantage of that. All right? And any funds that are left over in that predetermined budget set by you, John, will simply be paid to you, Jane, tax-free in a lump sum in the form of a check. Do you understand? Good. Now, do you guys know what a funeral costs on average? No, not really. That's okay. A traditional funeral and burial costs about $15,000. That's right. Now, obviously, we understand that you guys are pretty young and you seem pretty healthy, so if you're going to go, it's probably not going to be anytime soon. So to build in some room for inflation, yes, funerals are not immune to inflation, what we're going to do is give you $30,000 towards your final expense with the Freedom of Choice certificate. That is for you, John. Okay? And I understand that, John, if you were to pass away tomorrow, unfortunately, your paycheck would go with you. And life is a continuum. So Jane, I know that you need to continue to keep a roof over your head. And we understand that that's a very difficult place for families to be. So for that reason, the next section is all about income replacement. That readjustment income that will help you to keep Timmy in the same home with some consistency while you adjust to what life is going to be like. We're going to give you $4,000 for 36 months. And that adds up to be $144,000. Okay? Does that make sense? Good. Now, we understand that, again, you're young, you're pretty healthy. If you're going to go anywhere anytime soon, it's likely not going to be due to old age. It will likely be because of an accident. And when it comes to accidents, any accident, whether it takes place at home or at work, John, if you pass away because of an accident, we're going to pay Jane $130,000. Does that make sense? Good. And we know that when it comes to some of the leading causes of accidents, they happen in cars or because of cars. So John, we're going to increase that to $160,000 if it's because of a car. Whether you're the passenger or the driver, that's what we're going to be paying to Jane. Make sense? Good. And if that accident happens on a common carrier, we're talking anything like a bus or a plane or a train or a cruise ship, then we're going to pay $250,000 to Jane. Understand? Good. Now guys, I didn't just come here to talk to you about death. You know, the good news is there are benefits that you're able to claim while you're alive. So the first item under living benefits is hospitals. If you get in an accident, you may end up in the hospital, and I think it's fair to say that if you are recovering in the hospital, John, you're not also at the same time making money at work. So for that reason, we're going to pay you $300 per day for up to 365 days. Does that make sense? Good. Now, in the case of a very bad accident, you understand that you may end up in the intensive care unit. So, John, if you end up in the ICU, I think it's safe to say that you won't be going back to work anytime soon. For that reason, we double what you make per day, and we will pay you $600 per day for up to 14 days. Now, at the end of the 14 days, you'll then be receiving the $300. So you're still covered. Does that make sense? Good. And now this next area is where families really clean up. If you have an accident and you end up in the emergency room, then we're going to pay you $150 for that visit. Simply go to the emergency room sometime within the 72 hours after that accident, and we'll pay you $150. Does that make sense? Good. Now, Jane, I certainly don't want to leave you out here, so I want to mention that when it comes to the final expense coverage, that $30,000 that we mentioned for John, we're going to be able to match that exact same amount of $30,000 with the Freedom of Choice certificate for you. So that is for John, that is for Jane. Does that make sense? Good. And when it comes to Timmy, I want to also let you know that children are also covered, and we'll be able to include $10,000 toward his final expense. Okay? Good. When it comes to accidents, we know that they can happen to either of you. So Jane, I want to mention that you are also going to be covered for the same. In the event of any accident, we'll be giving you $130,000, John. If you pass away because of an accident, we'll give you that $130,000, whether it takes place at work or at home. And if it's an auto accident, whether you're the passenger or the driver, we'll give you $160,000, John. And when it comes to common carrier, if you pass away because of that, John, you'll be receiving $250,000. Does that make sense? Good. Now, when it comes to children, I just want to mention that they're also covered. So if it's any accident, Timmy would be covered for $6,000. That'll be paid to you. If it's an auto accident, passenger or driver, $12,000, and common carrier, $30,000. Just want to mention that. Does that make sense? Okay. And again, guys, I didn't come to you just talk about death. So when it comes to the living benefits, I want to also mention that, Jane, you are also covered for the living benefits, and so is Timmy. So when it comes to hospital accident, if you end up in the hospital, we'll be paying $300 per day, up to 365 days. All right, the same goes for Timmy. And so just to be clear, that means if all three of you ended up in the hospital, then we'd be paying $300 for each of you. It means that if Jane, if you're in the hospital for 7 days, then we're going to be paying you $2,100. Does that make sense? Okay, good. And when it comes to the ICU accidents, we understand that those can be pretty bad. So likewise, we're going to pay you $600 a day for up to 14 days, $300 thereafter. And when it comes to emergency rooms, people visit the emergency room for all sorts of reasons. It could be slipping down your own stairs or slip and fall outside on the ice. Whatever that reason, if you have an accident, simply go to the emergency room within 72 hours, and we're going to cover you, Jane, and Timmy. The whole family is covered for the exact same. I'm just going to write down whole family here, okay? Excellent. Now, I'm going to write down your options. And what I mean by options is what I first mentioned when it comes to the final expense coverage is $30,000, building in for inflation. But we also know that a funeral today could cost about $15,000 for a traditional funeral and burial. So because you don't have to build in for inflation, you can always start there and work your way up. Option 2 is based on $15,000, okay? Okay, now all other details being exactly the same, only difference, final expense. Option 1, your premium deposit, and your premium deposit for option 2. Now, the only question I have for you is which option is most comfortable for you?